Happy Thursday, everyone. We are with class 4 today. Class 4, y'all. How many have been to all of the classes so far? Y'all know the drill. Drop your location in the chat. We love to see where you're tuning in from. From Iowa, hello Miriam, Shanita, and ATL. That's Atlanta, Georgia, for those who may not know. Welcome. Drop your location in the chat. Let us know how many classes you've attended. If you missed other classes, they are recorded, but as always, it's nice to, come live and ask, the instructor the question live. All of them so far amazing. Ottawa, New York, Mexico, Canada, Oakland, St. Louis, Birmingham, Nigeria, Rochester. Love it. Love it. Yes, let us know how you're enjoying the classes. You do get a survey after every class. Please do fill out that out for feedback for us. And also whatever classes you want to see in part 2, because if you were here in the last class, you heard the news, we're doing a part 2 of the essentials. So what you want to know for the next classes, drop that in the chat. We already have some good suggestions, like we're going to do a class on pricing that was suggested, a class on captioning, because captioning your photos is so important. It goes beyond a Drake bar, okay? Like you need to actually know how to write captions, and that could also help you get hired. All of these classes are here to help you be where the money resides. So welcome everyone. We have a great treat today, because this class is all about being where the money resides. I mean, grant writing, print sales, all the things. Danielle knows it all. So welcome, Danielle, and thank you for joining us. And I will pass it to Ashera for more housekeeping.
Welcome everyone to the Essentials. This is a series of online classes for photographers, both emerging and professional. And it's presented by the Everyday Projects and our friends, Black women photographers. These free weekly workshops, at least for this season and hopefully for the next, are we encourage emerging and experienced editorial photographers to learn from them. And if you would like to continue learning more about the ins and outs of professional photojournalism, feel free to check out our websites. There are recordings from our previous classes, and this class will also be recorded. This is also the 4th class in our series of five free photography classes in the first series. Each class is 75 minutes, and we will include a Q&A, so prepare your questions for Danielle. And each class is recorded, so in case you miss any part of this session, do not fret. Check back on our websites on both the Everyday Projects and Black Women Photographers. We'll have the videos there. We'd like to also thank our friends at the Landfest Institute for Journalism and Facebook Journalism Project for supporting this series through our community networking grant. We are very excited to host you today, and I pass it on to Rebecca. Yeah.
Hey everyone, I am Rebecca. I'm a member of the Everyday Projects community team, and I just want to say that these webinars are free, but if you love them or found them beneficial or just like us as people, we would love if you would donate to Black Women Photographers. They're such a phenomenal organization doing really amazing things. Your donation would help them continue that. So you can donate via their website. I'll drop the link in the chat. And then also for those of you who haven't heard, or for a reminder for those of you who have, the Everyday Projects has a grant opportunity, and we are currently accepting applications until June 7th. We are granting $6,000 to 2 photojournalists as they develop their craft and work on a long-term project. In addition to that $6,000, the 2 grantees will also receive mentorship for the duration of their project from either Mallory Benedict of National Geographic or Jihan Jilani of The Guardian. So I will also, Peter put that into our chat already, so you can see more information there. Again, the deadline is June 7th. Please apply. We would love to see it. Can't wait. And okay, now, main event, Danielle. Danielle Villasana is a photojournalist based in Istanbul whose documentary work focuses on human rights, gender, displacement, and health around the world. She's a National Geographic Explorer, Magnum Foundation awardee, and an International Women's Media Foundation fellow. Danielle strongly believes in pairing photography with education and community. She's a co-founder of We Women, an Authority Collective board members. She's on the Everyday Projects community team and a Photo Bill of Rights co-author. She's also a member of Women Photograph and Ayün Fotógrafas. Ultimately, Danielle works by the words of her mentor, Donna De Cesare. You are a human being first and a journalist second. So Danielle, will you please take it away and teach us all that we need to know?
Yes, I will do my best. But yeah, thank you so much to everyone for tuning in. It's really cool to see where all of you are joining us from, and just goes to further solidify the importance of community, and just so happy to see all of these names and places. And thank you so much to the Everyday Projects, of course, and Black women photographers, Rebecca, Washira, Peter Austin, Polly. Thank you so much for making the essentials happen. It's been an amazing series. I've watched every single video and tuned into Nikki's presentation last week, and really looking forward to Yagazi's next week, and now phase 2. So these have been really, really great. And so thanks so much to these organizations for making that possible. As Rebecca mentioned, I'm also a community team member of the Everyday Projects, and I am a past co-founder of Everyday Latin America. And it's just been, again, such a joy, and I'm just so incredibly grateful to work with this robust community of storytellers around the world. So again, thank you all for tuning in and for being part of this community. So with that, let me share my screen. This is always the most anxiety-ridden part. Like, oh my God, is everyone gonna see my desktop? Okay. Can I get a thumbs up from our team to make sure it's just the slides and not my messy desktop or email?
You're good, you're good.
Okay, great, awesome. So yes, Rebecca already gave such a rich introduction, so I won't really touch too much on who I am, and thank you, Rebecca, for that introduction. Yeah, so basically, as Rebecca mentioned, I'm an independent photojournalist, and most of my personal documentary work focuses on issues surrounding gender, health, migration, and human rights issues around the world. So this is about how to fund personal projects, this webinar, but I wanted to first start off with a project that I've been working on long-term for nearly a decade. I started it in 2012, and it looks at the challenges facing transgender women throughout Latin America. And I wanted to show this work because it applies to a lot of the sort of issues and topics that we're going to go over today in terms of grant funding, because the fact that I've worked on this project for 10 years, you know, means that I've received various amounts of support over the years to continue to be able to make this work. So I thought that it would be great to start off with that. And I have photographed in communities from Argentina to Peru and Central America and Mexico. And this first slide that you see here, I went to Argentina in 2012 as a college student, actually through a grant that I received through my University of Texas at Austin. So we don't touch on the university grants, but if you're a student, there are so many opportunities out there. So make sure you're tapping into those at your universities. But yeah, I traveled to Argentina in 2012, the same year that the country passed the world's most progressive set of gender identity laws at the time. And I followed the lives of trans women, Jessica and Micaela, to highlight how the laws were affecting their lives. And this led to, again, a long-term documentary project looking at the life-threatening challenges that trans women face throughout Latin America, again, which I'm still working on to this day. I just want to give a little bit of a warning that some of the content that we're going to be looking at is graphic. So just a warning, and if you need to step away from your computers, like, no worries. So the following year, after living in Argentina, I moved to Peru, and I began the next chapter of this project called A Light Inside. And spanning the course of 4 years, I documented a community of trans women in Lima, Peru, again, focusing how the consequences of transphobia greatly affect their lives. Like most countries throughout the world, and in Latin America specifically, trans women are extremely marginalized and discriminated against in Peruvian society. Persecution begins very early, causing many to abandon their studies and families, and with few options or support, many women end up practicing prostitution. And though prostitution in Peru is not illegal, many trans women are oftentimes taken by police on the basis of not being able to show their identification cards. For example, in this image here, Kiara is being taken by serenascos or municipal police officers in a nightly patrol. And this was a nightly occurrence, multiple rounds every night. And the reality that many trans women face in Peru, such as the fact that 30% of trans women in Lima have HIV, is, according to Peruvian anthropologist Jimena Salazar, linked to high rates of sex work and drug abuse, which are themselves linked to extreme marginalization and lack of other options for survival. And unfortunately, these really harsh conditions and very dire situations contribute to the fact that most trans women do not live past 35 years old in Latin America, and Latin America leads the world in homicides of trans people at 80%. So after documenting, communities of trans women throughout the region, I've really come to witness that a short life is sadly is not as common as a long life. But one of my goals with this work, and in all of the work I do, and my approach, is to try to push back against harmful stereotypes in the media, which certainly includes how trans women are typically painted. And I also wanted to highlight the tight-knit bonds of the community, the love that they receive from partners and family, and just the simple, pure moments of daily life, which can be so powerful to pushing back against those misconceptions that people have of people and places. And I also intimately focus on the lives of women like Tamara, who was the first woman actually I started photographing in this project. And when we met, she was 27, and she would often talk about how she wasn't going to live past 30. I can still hear her voice in my head saying, why would I when society treats me as less than human? And Tamara was diagnosed with HIV, and sadly, less than 1 month after her 30th birthday, she passed away. Abre Camino, or Open Road, is an extension of my work in Peru, as I wanted to look at how the life-threatening challenges are pushing many women in Central America to migrate north toward Mexico and the United States as a form of self-preservation. So sort of the ways in which trans women protect themselves sort of looks different than, say, in South American countries like Peru. So I really wanted to focus on that migration within Central America to Mexico and the United States. In Central America, trans women are further threatened by the region's endemic violence from gangs, clients, and even family. And for example, Honduras, where the women in this picture are from, is one of the world's 7 most countries to be LGBTQIA. Alexa, who is one of the women I've been following for the past few years, has migrated multiple times to seek safety from dangers she faced at home, from physical assault to threats from gang members. And Alexa says, she simply wants to migrate to be more free. And I love sharing good news. Just yesterday, after months of waiting and facing violence along her journey throughout Mexico, she finally crossed into the United States. And I look forward to continuing following her story there as well. And another woman I've been following closely in this project, Abre Camino, is Catalea, who's in these images here. And when I met her in Honduras, she was already planning to migrate due to threats and mistreatment from neighbors and specifically family members, her brother. But shortly before leaving, her brother beat her up and ended up fracturing her collarbone. And I've photographed Cataleya's entire migration journey from Honduras to the southern border with Guatemala and Mexico, all the way through Mexico to the northern border with the United States. And she arrived to the border in 2019, where she was effectively given a number. It's that second picture. There's like a number written on a tiny little piece of paper to present her asylum case. And though she was close to being called in early 2020, before COVID-19 hit, the borders closed indefinitely. And overnight, everything just went downhill, she said. And she's had no idea when they might summon her to present her case. Despite all of these hurdles, though, Cataleya remained resilient and persevered, and more than 1 year after she was supposed to be summoned, she finally stepped foot into the United States earlier this month and flew to her new home of Washington, D.C. just last week. And, you know, while Cataleya is finally happy to feel safe in the United States, she's now beginning the next hurdle of her journey, which is seeking asylum without the ability to work and living in shelters. But something that Cataleya said that always sticks with me is migrating has taught me how to be a liberated person, not to be a bird trapped in a cage, to leave everything behind in the past to move forward. So I'm just, you know, again, so inspired by these women and their incredible resilience. And I, again, wanted to start with this project. Like in the past 2.5 weeks, I've probably applied to 10 grants / contests to continue this work. So you see, it's constantly something that I'm building on, that I'm looking for support and funding. So hopefully I can share some of the lessons that I've learned over the years in just continuously just knocking on doors. And with that, before we get started, I just want to start off by saying that over the course of, you know, the 7 years that I've been an independent photojournalist, I've applied to hundreds of contests and grants and opportunities. So not just recently, but over the course of 7 years, I mean, so many I can't even count. And out of all of those, I have probably received about 1% of those opportunities. So please, if you take anything away from my presentation today, it is to keep pushing, to keep trying, don't give up, seek support, believe in yourself, follow your heart, and of course, believe in the stories of the people that you're sharing. That's first and foremost. So with that, let's work like this Teddy. I think a lot of us can relate to that hustle and grind. So yeah. You want to apply to a grant. What do? The first really important step is to research what's out there. Every grant and contest is different, so make sure that you are reading carefully about what they're looking for, what the money will go towards, if they're looking to fund long-term work, or if new projects are fine. You'll find that every grant may not be for you, and that's totally fine. And I just also want to mention, you know, this presentation focuses specifically on grants, but a lot of the same sort of philosophies and thinking can be applied to contests as well. And I mean, I think that a lot of you probably already know this, right? But like a grant is where you apply for funding to support a project, and a contest oftentimes as well gives you the reward, you know, the reward money to continue a project. So there's a lot of similarities and overlap between the two. So you can sort of apply this to both. I also look at past winners to get an idea of who or what the organizations fund. So for example, if a year prior, a project about climate change in Latin America was awarded, they probably wouldn't fund that same issue the following year, maybe not even the same region. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't apply, but keeping your expectations in check is always really good for the heart and soul. And I often won't apply to anything that requires a fee to submit, because it can really easily add up. You know, it's easy to be like, oh, it's $10, it's $15. But if you do that 10 times over the course of a year, it's $100, you know? So just really be conscientious of that. And there are so many great opportunities to apply for contests and grants for free. And organizations like Women Photograph and the Everyday Projects also provide waivers for certain grants. So just always make sure to really read the fine print, not just like about the grant, but how to apply the rules, like everything, because you don't want to miss anything. And, you know, if a fee is too high, don't be shy to write and see if an exception can be made. I mean, the worst thing that they can do is say no. It's not like they're gonna put your name on a list and be like, this person asked for a waiver, like we shouldn't fund them, you know? So like always just openly ask. And that being said, if there are some grants out there that are, you know, the rewards are quite high. And so I think, you know, it's okay to, obviously this is a personal decision, I'm speaking for myself, but, you know, I think sometimes you can weigh the pros and cons. But again, this is a lot of learning from my own mistakes. I've invested a lot of money, you know, when I first was starting off and applying to things, and then realized like, oh, I'm not really winning a whole lot of this, so maybe I should just stick to the free ones. So yeah, research, very, very important. Okay, so you figure out what grant you want to apply to / contest, and now you need to think about the essay. And just like pitching to an editor, you have to be convincing, not only that the story is important, but that you're capable of telling this story and that you are the person to tell this story. So maybe that means pointing to past experience or including organizations or people on your project that you have relationships with that you'll work with or continue following. Again, why now? I mean, you know, it can be argued that every story and every person is special and unique. I mean, that's why I'm sure all of us here in this virtual room are photographers, because we're in love with the world and we're in love with stories and we believe in them and we believe in, you know, raising awareness. But unfortunately, not every story can be funded, not every story can be published. So you really have to be convincing about why now. For example, why should your project be supported right now? So things like a news hook or current events or a pressing issue can help. And you don't have to like, you know, write 10 pages. It can be 1 or 2 lines about like, why is it important now to fund this work? And again, a lot of this too is from personal experience and just hearing things from other talkers over the years. But I really truly believe that introducing your essay with a personalized angle will really help paint the issue. So don't just jump straight into statistics at the beginning, but do include them at some point in the essay, because it's really important to sort of give a backbone to the issue. So you're not just saying like, oh, this issue is really pressing and important, but you can say, because, you know, X% of people are, you know, suffering the consequences of X issue, right? So statistics are really important, which is also, you know, where your research is really important too. Excuse me, just one kind of silly little bit of advice, but I would advise also like work on a separate document. I love, for example, working in Google Docs, because even, for example, if you ask someone for feedback, they can just give you feedback directly to that document. It auto saves. Yeah, so try not to answer within the portal itself, work separately and then copy and paste your answers in, because the worst thing that could happen is you lose your work because the portal restarted or your session timed out or whatever. And then, yeah, when applying to, you know, when applying with the same project or to a different grant, oftentimes you can recycle a lot of the same writing, but again, tailoring the language so that it's specific to that grant is really important, right? You never want a judge or a person on a selection committee to be like, did they even read what this grant is about? You know, that's a really easy way to get your application knocked out. And like I said, I apply for the same grant year after year after year. I mean, I have folders that's like da-da-da grant 2019, da-da-da grant 2020. So having a record of, you know, what I applied with the year before and building off of that, it can be really helpful. So I am going to give y'all a personal example here of, this is sort of a combination of writing for a grant proposal that has been supported. Sorry, I'm just going to take a sip of water. So you can see, and of course this is about Abre Camino, the project that I shared with y'all. So you see I start off with a personal angle, right? I'm not just jumping into statistics. However, in the second paragraph, I do include a statistic. You know, Honduras, the same country that Samantha is from, is one of the world's most dangerous countries to be LGBTQIA. I also introduced the fact that I've been working on this issue since 2012. So that's the personal, like, why me? Why should I be the person to photograph this issue? And I'm not saying that I should be the only person. I think that there's many people who should be photographing similar issues. But again, giving that personal, showing that dedication, I think, to an issue and a community can be really important. And then the third paragraph, this is a really abridged version. There was other writing in between, but then I give, like, why is this important now? So I talked about, you know, why it would be really relevant to return now to look at how women like Catalea and Alexa were struggling with issues that were exacerbated by COVID-19. So again, that's the sort of why, you know, why now relevance to my proposal. So you've written the essay, the photos, right? We're all here because we're photographers, we're visual storytellers. So of course, this is the potentially most important part. There are some, you know, organizations that will specifically say in their call that they look at the essay just as, you know, carefully as the images. But I think it's safe to say that, you know, for most photo grants and contests, the photography is obviously really important. And for me, it's like the hardest part, you know, because you're so attached to your work, you're so personally invested in your work. So it's really hard to narrow down, to decide, you know, what goes and what stays. And this is true for everything, whether it's your website, like Nikki beautifully talked about in her presentation, but less is more. It is the hardest thing to do in the world, but really one semi-strong image can make a strong image just not as strong. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to weaken your strong images with so-so images just because you want to fulfill the, like, you know, if it says 40, you're like, oh, I have to submit 40. You don't. You can submit 30. You can submit 20. You can submit 35. I mean, I try to hover close to the, you know, maybe within 5 to 10 images. But yeah, less is more. Just like really drilling that in. And just like you would with a publication, right? You want to avoid repetition of information and creative elements. So every picture should give something new, and every picture, again, should be compelling, not only aesthetically, but also with the information. Every image should be building and moving the narrative along. And just like Polly mentioned, our phase 2, make sure your captions are well written and informative, and again, not too repetitive. Captions are a great way to squeeze in information that you couldn't in the application. So for example, if, you know, usually I just write my proposal and then I start cutting, and some things it's like, oh, I don't want to cut that because it's really important. And I'm like, ooh, but I can include it in the caption. I think also it's a great space to include direct quotes. So I try to always include quotes, not in every single caption, but in a few. And make sure that the photos, of course, are retouched well. Sometimes judges, depending on what platform they're looking at, you know, they may only see a grid at first when they're really going through that initial round of applications, as opposed to individual images. So, you know, in the beginning phases, it's really important that your pictures stand out, and not only, again, in the sort of sequential storytelling, but in the retouching. But again, not, you know, I would advise you know, against maybe too much contrast or filters. And again, following the instructions. So not just with the photos, but with the essay as well, making sure that you're fulfilling the word count, and with the images that, that you're doing the right size, you know, on the long size. Every single photo contest or grant will specifically tell you the dimensions that they want, the size of the file that they want, how they want it to be sent, how they want you to name your files, what they want you to include in the metadata or not. So following those instructions is so important. And sometimes they'll say, any application that doesn't follow these instructions will be automatically, you know, out of the running, which would totally suck to have your proposal be booted out because you did 3,000 pixels on the long side instead of 1,600. You know, that's a silly reason. So read the rules and instructions carefully. There was something I wanted to say. Oh, I think captions are really important because, again, I am speaking from personal experience. I'm speaking from, you know, just, I guess in 7 years, you just pick up things. But captions can be really important in the very final rounds of selection, right? So at first, judges may only just be looking at the images, right? And they narrow down, and then they have 4, right, essays that they're looking at, but only one can be awarded. So that's when they really start looking at the essay, or when they really start reading the caption. So it's so important to have all of those details just like down. Yeah, so okay, so again, I wanted to share a very personal example, but and this is fine because this was a public judging, so I'm not sharing any information that I shouldn't be sharing. But I submitted my project Abre Camino to a contest this year, again, that was judged publicly. So I could hear what the judges were saying, which was really cool. And it got to like the final 7 or 8 or 9, I can't remember exactly, but it got like close enough that I was so excited. I mean, it didn't win, it didn't even get a finalist, but it was cool. I was like, wow, it means like I'm kind of doing something right. But what was really beneficial was hearing the judges' feedback and seeing how they came to awarding the one winner. And something that really stuck with me that of course I have now applied to future, to more recent submissions is, one of the judges pointed out that towards the end, like it starts off really strong, you know, it's like every photo is building on each other. It's like every photo is different. Every photo has something new, different to offer. But then towards the end, it starts to like weaken a little bit. And one judge, for example, pointed out that on the very last row, for example, that first photo and the third photo are very similar. And they were totally right. You know, it's like a picture of someone walking and then you have lines, you know, so sort of, again, visually, it's like your eyes are really sort of attracted and locked into that beginning. And then it just sort of like peters out a little bit, which is totally valid. And I think, you know, I mean, I'll get to this towards the end, but, you know, don't beat yourself up. You know, this is all about every no, every rejection is an opportunity to improve, to, you know, identify the weaknesses, identify the gaps, identify the holes, and then just, you know, make it better next time. It doesn't mean that you're a horrible photographer and you need to quit and you shouldn't be a photographer. No, it just is an opportunity to improve. So I was really grateful to hear that feedback. Yeah. And then, yeah, even those last like 4 or 5 images, like visually, like if you just kind of blur your eyes, like they don't look the same as the other ones. Like the palette is different. You know, so all of those things are very important. It starts to get repetitive. So I think if I had eliminated maybe 5 of these images, I don't think that it would have won because they were really in love with the story that won, but maybe it would have, you know, gotten to closer. So now the money part. I mean, this is all about getting support to fund your project. Yeah, so obviously a grant is to support the project, which means paying for your expenses. So, you know, be reasonable. Don't be afraid to pay yourself if that's acceptable. So sometimes a grant will say, yes, you can put a line in there to pay yourself. Sometimes grants say, no, this is only for project production, which means like the flights and the hotels, or if you're, you know, photographing locally, then, you know, the transportation to get to the place. I mean, when I think about expenses, like costs that I will incur, I literally just imagine start to finish, and I write down everything, you know, that might come up. So again, if you're traveling, that could be SIM cards, that could be visa fees, that could be you know, COVID, PPE, you know, masks, personal protective equipment. So just thinking about all of the things that you need to produce this work, because again, learning from personal experience, it's hard to say it's not worth it, but just be so careful not to go into debt with personal project work, because again, it's really difficult because you care so much about it and you really believe in it. So sometimes you're like, oh, I'll just spend my own money, but that can get really tricky, and it can lead to, you know, debt. So just be really careful. So yeah, again, estimating the expenses, all of them, what's needed to create the work. And again, look at the fine print, right? Because some, you know, grants are gonna say, yes, we do, and others do not. If they don't, for example, recently I submitted to a grant that it wasn't written in the guidelines, and for whatever reason, I didn't write to them. Always feel free to write to organizations, you know, if you have questions. I think I was just really pressed with other deadlines. And so in the budget, they request a budget. So I said X amount of money for compensation, but if that is not allowed, then I'll add another city or I'll add more days, you know, so I kind of put it that way. That way, you know, if they're like, oh yeah, everything's great about this project. Ooh, the budget, she wants to pay herself, that's not allowed. At least in there, I said, it's not allowed, that's okay, I'll just do this instead. So reading the fine print, and if you're not sure, don't do what I did, write to them. Yeah, so that's the money. And here's just a sort of overview, for example, of certain, you know, expenses that you might incur: flights, drivers, taxis, lodging, meals, visa fees, SIM card, equipment. I mean, really like try to visualize your steps, you know, the steps that you're going to take and everything that might, you know, happen along the way. And that goes for assignments too, right? If you're commissioned for an assignment, like you should be getting paid your expenses back. So that means saving all of your receipts. Now I'm going off on a tangent, but you know, even for if it was a water, if you had to buy water on your assignment, that should be something that you're expensing. And then, yeah, if you're applying for a grant that's, you know, to create a photo book or a website or whatever, again, thinking about, okay, what are all the costs that I might incur? Do I need a designer? Do I need to pay an editor? What about printing? What about shipping? You know, so all of these things. And so organizations, you know, where do I apply? Where do I start looking? Again, in the beginning, I mentioned grants versus contests, but there's so much overlap there. And then again, keeping in mind the free versus paid. But again, there is just, when you start looking, sometimes it feels like there's not a lot out there, but there really truly is a lot out there. The everyday projects being one. We talked about the upcoming grant deadline for the Everyday Projects grant, which is really cool and unique, and that you also get mentorship support. So I love that the Everyday Projects is offering that. And here's just a very short list of some of the, you know, grants that are out there. And I should say, again, grants versus contests, right? Because it's a sort of fine line. Again, because contests sometimes they're going to award you to continue with a project. And then, you know, organizations like the International Women's Media Foundation, the Pulitzer Center, and National Geographic Society, they have various types of grants, some of them on rolling deadlines. So just check out those organizations. And there are platforms as well that you can follow for updates on grants. So Picture is a platform that a lot of organizations use to submit, and you can sign up for their newsletter and, you know, get alerts of grants. Women Photograph has a really great resource on their website with the calendar and links and stuff like that. Visura as well. And I also sign up to organizations' newsletters, for example, like Magnum Foundation. I mean, I can't even list all the ones but that's a great way too to stay informed about, you know, when grants and contests open, because it is also difficult to keep track of everything. So highly advocate for Google Calendar. I probably should have worked for Google because I love Google Docs and Google Calendar. So to end, I just also want to briefly talk about staying motivated, having compassion for yourself. You know, I know that we can all relate to, you know, that feeling of being rejected, or getting a no, or you've applied to that same grant 5 times and you've gotten rejected again. Like, it's okay. I know it sucks. I have cried on bathroom floors. Like, it sucks, but try not to take it personally. I really, that for me was like a pivot. It was like almost like it was a moment, it was a milestone where I said, you know what? I'm not going to take this personally anymore. Like, I believe in my work. I believe in the stories of the people that I'm following. I believe in the people that I'm following, and that's enough. So maybe just the timing wasn't right. Maybe, you know, there's so many, it's like 99.999% of the time, it's not personal, you know, maybe they loved your project, but it just didn't fit for what they were looking for whatever reason. A lot of times I'll look at like who the judges are as well. And I'll say, well, if anything, like, it'll be cool to put my work in front of, you know, these judges. Yeah, asking others for feedback is so important, both on your photo edit and your essay. That can be really helpful, but don't wait until the last minute to ask. Give people time. So that means, you know, working ahead and not procrastinating. Again, do as I say, not as I do. And again, you know, never be afraid to, you know, ask questions to the organization, etc. And even sometimes if you miss the deadline for, I think I've done this once, but for some reason, I think, I mean, I'd have to look back. This was a couple of years ago, but it was an assignment and I had my proposal like finished, but I didn't hit submit, whatever. I wrote to them, and to my surprise, they were like, you know what? Sure, we'll reopen this for like 24 hours or whatever, submit. I didn't get the grant, but like, hey, they let me submit and I, you know, had a chance. So never be afraid. The worst they're going to say is like, no, they're not going to blacklist you. You'll be okay. And yes, the last example, I'm sure we can all relate to this moment, you know, again, of the pain that comes from a rejection. This was just like it was just self-portrait, but I thought it painted the example well. But, you know, use this to push you forward, to improve, to tell yourself like, no, I can do this. This is important. What do I need to do to improve? And you don't always have to come to that conclusion. It's okay if you decide that maybe the project is not working out in the way that you had hoped, and maybe it's time to focus on something else. And just always, you know, listen to your heart, trust yourself, don't doubt yourself. And every path is different. Everyone is unique and has something to offer. So just keep going. Just keep going. That's my takeaway for today. So thank you so much. And I look forward to your questions. I haven't been able to look at the questions at all. So, but hopefully I'm sure we have some good ones out there. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That was excellent. We'll just jump right in. I will start from the top, relating back to your work before jumping into the questions relating to grants and money and applications. So back to the work that you showed in the beginning, Stuart asked, how have you managed to keep yourself and people you are documenting in this sensitized project safe? For example, images of the couples getting intimate can cause trouble here in Uganda.
Yes, that is such a great question, and certainly something that, you know, I would have delved more into if it wasn't just about grant writing. But yes, like my number one, first and foremost rule before anything is ethics. So that means being transparent with the people who you're photographing before you even start taking pictures. About what the project is, where the work might end up, if you're working independently, if you're on assignment, your intentions, you know, being as transparent as you possibly can be in terms of, you know, where the work might end up. And I always just go like way above and beyond, you know, like, look, a lot of times I'm working independently on these things, right? So I say, you know, I'm an independent photographer. I've been working on this issue for X amount of years. I don't know where this might be published. I'm, you know, hoping to reach out to X publication, or I'm here on an X grant and this is what it means, you know. But I might share this work on social media. And if it does get published, this is where it might end up. And this is how many people might see it, right? So having those really in-depth conversations about consent and what consent actually means is so important. Like, especially if it's a really sensitive topic, not just being like, hey, like, can I photograph your life? And they're like, sure, you know, and you're like, cool. They said yes, like, that is not enough for me. I need to be like, this might show up on like buildings one day, because who knows, sometimes, you know, your archives, you have them for years, right? So maybe 5 years from now, someone approaches me and they say, hey, we're doing a, you know, exhibition on LGBTQIA rights in Latin America, and it's going to be public. It's going to be in Times Square, right? So like when I have those initial conversations with people, I let them know what is the like ultimate thing that might happen. And then you also have to be careful though to manage expectations, right? Because if you're saying like, oh, this might happen and this might happen and this might happen, and then nothing happens, because we know that most of the time like none of that is actually going to happen, because it's so hard to be independent and get your work published. Then they might be like, wait a second, I thought you said all these things might happen, and I just let you follow my life for 5 months, and like, what? So I always try to say like, you know, just have a really long in-depth conversation, especially, right? Like, yes, in countries where people's lives could be at risk, or it's the last thing I'll say, because I know I'm talking a lot. But with Katalea, for example, you know, to talk about how her brother beat her up publicly, and this story was actually published in National Geographic as part of a group project that the Everyday Projects did, looking at the impact of migration on women worldwide. You know, so I had those conversations with her, right? Like, Nat Geo has 140 million followers, right? That's like a lot of people, you know? So we had multiple conversations about what talking about her story publicly, you know, might mean. So yes, thank you so much for bringing up that question, because honestly, ethics is the first and foremost rule. You do not want to cause harm. That's, you know, obviously not the point of why any of us are here. And sometimes, you know, you may have good intentions, but the impact is different. So having those conversations is so important, and continuously, right? Not just saying like, oh, well, they told me yes, you know, whatever, right? Having continuous conversations, I think is really important when possible. I understand that sometimes people lose communication and sometimes it's not always possible, but yeah, thank you so much for asking that question.
And thank you so much for answering that so well. Okay, let's dive right into the money and applications. Claire asks, how do you approach writing applications for a brand new project with no work in progress? So many grants I find require some sort of work in progress.
Yes, that's a great question. I would say, again, because most of the grants and contests that I've applied for is with this long-term work. I don't have a whole lot of personal experience, but I have pitched ideas, for example, that maybe I haven't done before. Or I might think about applying for a project, for a grant for a project that I haven't done before. And my sort of approach would be, okay, maybe I haven't photographed this specific issue, but maybe I've photographed in that region. Or maybe this issue is looking at, the impact of climate change and gender. And I've done a lot of stories on climate change, or I've done a lot of stories on gender. I think anything like that, even if it's not like specific to the exact issue, region or community that you're covering, if you can find any link at all, can help, I think, with supporting your proposal. And what was I going to say? It'll come back to me. Yeah, but I think that's the gist of my response, but it'll come back, I'm sure.
No, you make an excellent point, because I've sat on a few grants, and really people just want to see that you are able to do this work that you're proposing. And what experience have you had? Go ahead.
No, please keep going. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, I mean, like, okay, if you're gonna say, you're gonna speak to X community, like, do you have work similar? Have you been in that community? What have you done that can show you that you can actually do this? Whether it's like a whole different project, but you just have to show that you're able to carry it out.
Yes, exactly. What Polly said, and thank you, Polly, because you started me thinking again. Yeah, like, for example, maybe you haven't photographed anything, but you've been in touch with NGOs, or organizations that are working in the community, and you've talked to them about your project, and they're supportive of you, working, alongside them or photographing their work, so anything like that can really be helpful. And I just wanted to also mention, not every proposal needs to just start photographing in your own community. What are the issues in your own community? And for example, Light Inside, I lived in Lima, so it was very low cost for me to get on a bus and go and photograph that community. I even lived for a time period in the same neighborhood as the women I was following. So you can keep costs down really by just photographing in your own neighborhood, in your own community, in your own city.
Absolutely. You have unique access and rapport, and you are a member of that community. Use that to your advantage. Next question is saying, it seems you have to have a lot of experience to apply to most grants. You don't, just saying you don't. It seems like if you don't, as someone who is new to photojournalism, when would you say is the right time to start considering applying for grants? Could you apply after creating one personal project?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, again, if anything, just applying is going to teach you so much. You're going to write the essay. You're going to sometimes I'm like, whoa, I'm glad I went through that process, because now I have more clarity about what I'm doing. So whether I get that or not, it has helped me, do more research on the topic, or, there's a new project that I want to start and I've done so much research on it. I've pitched it. I'm like, maybe none of it will ever come to fruition, but now this is something I know a lot about. Right. So I think it's also about you and yourself as a storyteller, and growing as a storyteller and expanding your knowledge. And yeah, if you've created one story, that's great. And even if you haven't, right, you can even submit sometimes a portfolio of single images. And yeah, again, back to the point of everyone is unique and everyone has a different path. I mean, I've been now working 7 years, and I've seen I've seen, right? We have seen it all, right? There may be one project that someone does that is just like, it just works and it's great. And it just boom, 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 boom. That person, is just getting support left and right. And so, yeah, just never be discouraged to apply. Again, the worst that's going to happen is you won't get it. The best that's going to happen is that it pushes you forward, it makes you better, stronger, improve, your skill set and all that. So really, it's a great practice to do. Just remember to protect your heart and don't take it personally.
Yes. And you mentioned something that's part of someone's question, the rest I'm adding to it. Someone asked, how long does it typically take you? You applied for over 200 grants, right? For me, my question to add to that person's question is, can you talk more about your strategy or just your workflow for, applying to grants? Do you have a weekly, sheet, Excel sheet of like, here are the grants, here are the deadlines, here's what I've applied to, here's what's rolling, here's what I missed, but I'll check out if they have it next year. Like, what workflow do you have? What tips or strategies do you have to be on the lookout for new grants? You already mentioned some of the organizations, Women Photograph, Everyday Projects, Pulitzer Center, etc. And I've also, and Peter has also dropped some information in the chat for folks to look out to. But do you have any, just like any of your personal tips or strategies for how you are, you stay organized when applying and how you apply and etc.?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, an advocate of Google Docs. But yeah, I definitely mark things down in the calendar. And I guess I'm just gonna be real nitty gritty in terms of like my, the things that I do to help keep me organized, right? Like I have a calendar that's just for photo contests and deadlines, and it's a different color than say my personal calendar or my everyday projects calendar, or right? So if you want to toggle it on or toggle it off, you don't have to, if you're like, you know what, I'm going to take a break from applying, I'm going to toggle this off or whatever. Also, I mentioned I'm applying for the same grant year after year, or maybe I'm applying to various grants in one year with the same project. So oftentimes I will, again, Google Docs is great because, it just auto saves, maybe you don't have to worry about like changing computers or hard drives or anything like that, right? It all just lives on the cloud. And so sometimes like say I'm applying to a new, like, usually what I do is I'll say I'm looking at the grant proposal page, and then I open up a Google Doc and I'll just copy and paste, right? I'll have like about X grant and all of the like things that I need to know, because sometimes people will go on and on and on about the grant and why it's important, which is great. It's really important to read that. But when it comes to the application process, it's not necessarily information that like you need to know, right? So I like take out all the important, super important bits. And then I copy and paste the question, the character count, and then I just start writing. And if it's something that I did in the past, I'll paste at the very bottom of the document what I wrote, what I did last year, right? Or what I did, an X grant, and I'll tweak it. So, if the grant is saying, and various ways that you can sort of tweak it. Yeah, because honestly, like this is also about protecting your time, right? We're not just applying to grants and contests all day long, right? We're also working, we're pitching, we're, cleaning our house, right? Like our time is valuable. So you don't want to like reinvent the wheel every single time. So the more you can build off of previous work, the better. So yeah, working off of, a Google Doc from a past, proposal can be really helpful. Calendars, I use Asana. I don't know, I hope I'm getting it to the right answer here, but I use Asana. It's free. It's basically just like a glorified to-do list. So in my Asana, I have a section that's just for grants and contests. So say the grant is due like June 15th. I'll put in my Asana, May 15th, like X grant coming up in 1 month. And then of course I like snooze it, just like I do my alarm to wake up in the morning, until like one day before the grant is due. So don't do what I do. But yeah, so setting up notifications can also be really helpful. And again, asking people ahead of time, like this, for this kind of more recent round of grants, I was like, you know what? I've applied so many times with this same project, and I feel like I've gotten kind of close in certain ways. You know, I'm like finalist here, saw the judge. So I'm like, what am I doing wrong? You know, so this time I am so proud of myself, because the first time ever I actually wrote the essay ahead of time, weeks ahead of time, and asked someone who I trust very deeply for feedback, you know? And so, but I calculated time for them, right, to have 2 weeks to look at it, and then for myself to have 1 week to revise it, because you want to be, and I'm sure many people here, you know, love supporting other people in the community. It's all about uplifting and supporting one another. But I get a lot of requests. So like, you look at this, you look at this, which I'm so happy to do. But if someone's asking me and the deadline's like 5 days from when they ask, like sometimes I'm just like, I'm so sorry. Like I can't. Like I live like a week and a half ahead, you know? So like really making time for that person to review is really, really important. Google Docs.
Love it. Great insight. And Michelle, it really depends on your own time, like how long it'll take you to write something out. Because she asked, like, how many hours. For some people, they can bust it, like 2 hours. Others may take 30 minutes. It really depends on you and your workflow. So that is a very personal question. Going back to the Q&A, one person asked, what will be your best advice for non-native speakers when applying for grants?
That's a really great question, and hopefully something, for example, there are organizations out there, US-based organizations that are now, that now accept applications in different languages. So just off the top of my head, like the International Women's Media Foundation, I think accepts applications in different languages. So sometimes, and I see it happening more and more, that one foundation, the Open Society Foundation, I wasn't on the list. Like I said, that list was not, that was just a tiny hair. I believe I've seen like applications, you can submit in different languages. A lot of times though, they'll say application must be written in English, or application must be written, for example, Visa por l'Image right now has a lot of contests and grants open, and theirs is you have to either submit in English or French. I mean, again, as always, like it doesn't hurt to ask, because even asking shows people that there's a need, right? So if 15 people write saying like, hey, can I submit my application in Spanish? I realize that it says only English and French, but I just wanted to make sure that an exception can't be made. I mean, again, you can like be nice about it. And then if they get 15 requests, maybe you're like, oh, dang, we need to like start, accepting applications in Spanish. So I think, in terms of like, it is kind of a personal question, but I would, for example, I'm bilingual, so I'm not a native Spanish speaker, but I'm part of Ayün, Fotógrafas, and there's a lot of native Spanish speakers, and then me as a non-native Spanish speaker, but sometimes we'll like, hey, can you check this caption for me? Or, hey, I wrote this paragraph in English, can you check it? So sometimes like, say, your first language is Arabic, but you have a friend who, say your first language is Arabic and you speak English like so, maybe you write your proposal in English and then you ask your friend, hey, can you check this English? And here's the Arabic version, just in case you want to see what I wrote, right? Like always trying to make things sort of less of a heavy lift for people is really important when you're asking them for their time. but like trying to think of people out there who might be able to help you with translation, not being like, here's my essay in Arabic, can you, translate it, unless your friend's a great friend and they'll do that for you. But yeah. And that being said, like I've seen incredible photo work, and the essay, you can, you see that like, okay, maybe English isn't their first language, but like they're getting the point across, their work is incredibly powerful. Like it doesn't need to be perfect, So I would really also keep that in mind. Like, don't be discouraged if like English or French or Spanish isn't your first language and that's the language that you need to write in. Like, just do your best, because if the photo work is strong enough, it will speak for itself. And last thing, sorry, you can always, maybe you submit and then maybe you write to the foundation and you say, hi, so-and-so, like I just submitted to the X grant. I just wanted to flag that I'm a non-native English speaker. I tried my best, any always sort of keeping that line of communication can be really important, because maybe in the judging, process, people are like, ooh, I really like this essay, but like, I really like this photo essay, but we're kind of confused. And then they could be, oh, you know what that person wrote? Maybe we can write to them and ask them for more information. I've been on, like Polly said, on selection panels where like, you really like a project. And so you're like, you know what, let's write to them. We have some questions. Let's write to them and see what they say. So yeah, never be afraid to reach out about those things. But hopefully it's something that happens, with more frequency. And also looking for those opportunities within your own community, within your own country, is also really important. So not just going for this, English opportunities, but hopefully more of those, US-based organizations will have the capacity to accept applications in different languages. Because it's not, I don't think it's about, I think it's more about capacity. Maybe there aren't people on their team, so yeah, hopefully that changes though. And I think it's changing slowly.
Yes, I will turn it to Rebecca to ask some other questions.
Okay, so we have a couple people who are asking about money, and when applying for a grant, if they need new gear, is it appropriate to write in the estimation of that new gear within the grant proposal and the budget?
Yeah, that's a great question, which is why reading the fine print is so, so important. And again, if you're not sure, because sometimes people will say, okay, we're awarding $5,000 to produce a project, and that's it. They don't tell you if you can pay yourself. They don't tell you, there's no guidance on what might be accepted or what might not be accepted. So really, if there's no guidance, it's kind of like, well, maybe then it could be anything, right? Anything that I need to produce this project. I will get to your question, but in terms of compensation, if a grant doesn't specifically say that they do not give funding to pay yourself, I'll usually do about 10%, right? So if it's a $5,000 grant, you don't want to be like, I'm going to pay myself $4,000, because it's just, they want, I just think it's not feasible, right? But I think $1,000 is fine, right? If you're going to be a month or 6 weeks working without, you have your rent, you have your bills, right? So I think, 10% of whatever that grant total might be, within reason, right? Like, if it's a really big grant, then you don't want to be like, oh, cool, I'm going to pay myself $10,000 or whatever. So, always within reason. And when in doubt, ask. But there are a lot of grants out there that do allow you to apply for equipment. National Geographic Society is one that I can think of off the top of my head that actually has a line in the budget if you want to include for equipment. And again, I would be, I would always try to be reasonable, right? Like put yourselves in the funder's shoes. So for example, if it's a $5,000 grant, and you're photographing in your own community, so all of you have no living expense, you have no lodging expenses because you live at home, and you have no food expenses because you're eating at home, and you have, you can take the bus. So maybe all of those costs are really, really low. Then maybe you can, put $4,000 towards, getting a new camera because yours is 6 years old and, it's just not functioning well. Maybe you can. But again, I would say when in doubt, just always write. And that being said, sometimes going back to process, sometimes I'll read about the grant like immediately. That way, if I have any questions, I can reach out to that organization at that moment, because sometimes organizations may be slow to respond because maybe it's, a grant or a contest that's just like they only have that email address for that contest and grant. So they're maybe not going to look until a week before it closes. So always writing ahead of time is really important as well. So yeah, I hope that helps.
Okay, so we had a question about when you're applying for a grant, when you haven't yet shot the images, but you're using old images as proof that you have experience, how you caption those and how you explain it within the grant that these images are not for that project, but are proof that you have the experience. How do you use older images to apply for a not yet shot grant proposal?
Yeah, I do that a lot. And I guess this could be a good moment to say, so that the nearly 10-year body of work, the first chapter in Argentina, I was able to produce through a university grant. Then a light inside, I moved to Peru through a study abroad program and then moved there. And that's where I sort of started my career as an independent photojournalist, working for local Peruvian publications. And again, lived in Lima where I was photographing. So my expenses were very low. And then when I started Abre Camino, I started it where I would be on assignment, say in Mexico. And then I would tack on, obviously not expensing the publication, of course. But say your assignment is 4 days, then I'd tack on maybe 4 extra days where I'm now paying for my own hotel and my own transportation and food. So maybe you end up spending what you earned on the assignment, but you break even. And then you start doing a little bit of, research, investigation while you're there. So that's kind of how I very slowly started Abre Camino, actually in 2016. Most of the work that I submit is not until 2018. I think that's where the work started to get a little bit stronger, but I started in 2016, sort of, investigating. And in 2018, I was accepted as part of the IWMF's Adelante Fellowship. So I went to Honduras for a separate project with a writer, but then I stayed like a month or 6 weeks more. And that's when I really started working on Abre Camino. And then I applied for a Nat Geo Society grant and received that, but it was a group project that I applied for. And so we all got funding to work on our, individual projects. So I was able to go back. And then the very last iteration or the most recent that I've worked on was a Nat Geo Society grant, but they're COVID-19 grants. So a lot of Abre Camino, a lot of my long-term work has been like, I've done this and I want to do this, so it's been like applying with past work. And I think it's pretty straightforward. I think, in fact, a lot of organizations will say, please, we are looking for ongoing projects. So they already know that you are applying for a project that you want to continue or that you want to finish, and the work that you're submitting is past work. So a lot of times it's like they're sort of expecting that anyways. And the way that I just sort of included in the essay is, with this funding, I would complete the last chapter of Abre Camino, which is following women who have made it to the United States since 2018. I've been, photographing the push and pull factors of migration affecting trans women in Central America and Honduras and Guatemala, El Salvador, through Mexico. So you can like dedicate 1 or 2 sentences to talking about like what you have done. And then they're expecting to see that, you know, so you don't really have to put in the captions like, you know, this is my past work, you know, like I think that there's like an understanding there. So I wouldn't worry too much. And instead of worrying, like use that, you know, to your advantage, because clearly if it's something that you're continuing and building on, you know, that's a good thing.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so we are coming close to the end of the time. Danielle, do you have time for 2 quick questions that I think are awesome and will be helpful? Everyone in the audience, please stay on if you can. If you have to jump off and you miss these last questions, this is being recorded and we will post it on our website ASAP, so you can come back and watch the last couple minutes. Briefly, do you mind explaining how your Nat Geo Women on the Move project came to be? That was such a collaboration. How did you apply for a grant for that, etc.?
Why, yes, I would love to talk about that. So first of all, as mentioned, the Women on the Move project was an everyday project. I always have to like work on that wording and grant proposal. Like, sounds funny to say everyday project. But yes, it was a project that originated within the everyday projects, told by women photographers within our community, looking at the impact of migration on women worldwide. And this came about because National Geographic was looking for pitches about women for 2020. They were, you know, the intention and goal was to publish, you know, a majority of stories about women by women. And so we knew about, you know, that they were looking for these pitches. And so we pitched looking at migration and how that intersects with gender issues and climate change. And I mean, it really covered a lot of issues, not just women in migration, right? It was very intersectional. So when I applied so it was kind of happening simultaneously. I mean, we pitched National Geographic, the publication, and then at the same time, we applied for a National Geographic Society grant. And of course, with any group project with National Geographic Society specifically, there's just one person who applies. So, you know, as the project lead, you know, I was the one sort of asking, you know, different women in our community, you know, that we want to start this project. Is there any, you know, story that they're interested in telling? And then that way we, you know, through that built the project application. But a lot of the, you know, sort of like why now and all of that, like that was me, you know, writing that, of course, with the, you know, feedback and edits from our amazing community team. Yeah, and so sort of simultaneously, the project was accepted for publication and we also got the grant. So it sort of like came together in a really great way. But yeah, more and more, and I've heard actually like grant funders and editors kind of saying this more often, that they're really loving the community projects, you know, group projects, these projects that are being produced, you know, as a collective or as a group. Like it's really kind of unconventional, but it's becoming more conventional. So, you know, I wouldn't be discouraged to apply to things as a group. And again, if you're not, sometimes the application will say this is for one photographer, but if it doesn't say, like, again, totally fine to ask. Yes, and that is again where Google Docs is great, because working with 7 other people and yourself can be really tricky. So staying organized is really important, and sort of managing all of those moving parts can be really challenging. So organization, I think, is really, really important, however that looks to you. Yeah, if I didn't answer something specific about that, I'm happy to add more about how Women on the Move came to be.
Awesome, thank you. And I just dropped the link for that story. You can also find it in the February issue of National Geographic for those of you like me who'd rather hold it in your hand. Okay, so we're gonna do one last question. And this is a question that I think all journalists ask themselves, and I think it's important to bring to the forefront whenever we can. But it's the why me question. You know, how do you, and I believe this was asked by Wasi, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but how do you balance the need and importance of amplification of issues within minorities and marginalized groups when there is the risk of possible appropriation or misconstruing of their community, etc. And something that somebody else asked that I want to tack onto that is sometimes while photographing situations like this, you might find yourself in a precarious position or witnessing something in an emergency that's against these people that you're working with. And where do you draw the line between photographer and human? You know, what is your role in that type of situation? If that did not make sense, I can re-clarify.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And that's two really, really good questions that almost warrant their own course. So maybe we should also think about
noted for that.
yeah, adding a course about this. So for the first question, I mean, I will just speak from my own personal experience of following communities of trans women in Latin America for nearly a decade. I am not from Latin America. I'm white Hispanic. I have, roots in Mexico, but I'm not from Latin America. I am not from the LGBTQIA community. I am not a trans woman. So, I am not a part of this community. But what I think that I bring that is perhaps important is that that one of the reasons why I even started this work to begin with is because I was not seeing stories of trans women in mainstream media that did not, always rely on stereotypical portrayals of, transgender women and what they go through. And I really wanted to see stories that balanced that narrative more, that didn't just focus on, the fact that the majority are relegated to sex work and only photographing sex work. I mean, to this day, I have never photographed a trans woman with her client. I have photographed the effects and the consequences of sex work because this is an issue that is real and has real consequences. So as a storyteller, it's not something that I want to ignore, but I think sort of focusing on the sort of more sensationalistic, stereotypical aspects of a certain issue or a community can be very problematic. And so I think that that's sort of what I offer as an outsider that is different. Not so much now. I think that there's a lot more nuanced storytelling about LGBTQIA communities, but even still today, I'll see stories in publications where I'm like, oh, man, where show us what we don't normally think or see, that's going to challenge people's perceptions. And so that was a big reason for actually starting this work, this project, was because I wasn't seeing those stories in the media. And then the other sort of reason, for example, the Women on the Move project, there were 2 of 8 women in that project who were not from the community that they were photographing, me being one of them. But the project and the issue that we were photographing is one that we've been dedicated to for years, which I'm not saying that necessarily means like, okay, yeah, you're cool to photograph, that community or that issue, but it does show commitment, it shows dedication, it shows, and I think that that's really important, right? We're not just parachuting into the community or parachuting into the issue. And I think that that's really important because it shows shows knowledge, right? I think the issue with parachuting is that, you know, you drop into a community or you drop into an issue that you know really little about. And so you rely on those stereotypes to tell the story, and those stereotypes are harmful. So yeah, I hope that that helps. I mean, clear, like, we need both insider and outsider perspectives in the media. You know, we have a major issue with the way that stories have been told for decades. And so hopefully, you know, we will continue to increase inclusivity within the visual media industry, because this is absolutely important. So many of the issues that our world is because of the fact that, you know, storytelling has been told through a homogenous lens. So I would definitely I am from Texas. I do not live in Texas, but I think, you know, photographing issues in communities that we know about is really, really important. So I hope that helps. And then the second question, just really, really quickly, if I understood it correctly, is like how to keep yourself safe. What was it again, Rebecca?
Yeah, the line between
yes, the line.
Sorry, dog barking, but the line between journalists.
Yeah. Thank you for jogging my memory. Yeah, that's a really tough one, because I imagine the majority of all of us in this virtual space decided to become photojournalists because we want to make a difference in the world. We want not our stories, but we want the stories of the people we're sharing to have impact. We want these issues to change. We want, you know, injustices to go away. You know, we do this because we're certainly not doing it to get rich or famous, because that road, you should go to Hollywood or something. But yeah, so I think that is why it gets so complicated, because you care about a person or a community or an issue, and you are clearly witnessing challenges that community might be going through. And additionally, it's important to raise awareness, and it's important to raise, you know, to educate through publication, but is that really doing enough? Am I really changing anything with my photography? And this is something that I really struggled with and grappled with when I was first starting off as a photojournalist and working on a lighten side. Grew very, very close to a lot of the women that I photographed who ended up passing away. And it was really hard. I mean, I really felt like, why am I a photographer? I mean, maybe I should go into social work, or maybe I should be a lawyer, or the good kind, you know, not that all lawyers are bad, but not all lawyers. But then I just sort of realized, you know what, this is my tool. We all have a tool, right? I mean, there are people who go into immigration law and feel like they're not getting anywhere either. So this is my tool. This is my way of trying to raise awareness and trying to educate. Maybe sometimes it's not going to work. Maybe most of the time it might not work, but this is my way of trying. This is my effort that I'm making, and I have to be okay with that. You know, I am a photographer. I'm not a social worker. I'm not an activist. I'm not a doctor. I am a photographer, and I have to be okay with that. And that was hard. You know, that was really hard. I had to be like, are you okay with being a photographer? So I would ask yourself those questions, and those questions are so important, because at the end of the day, like I said, it's just a tool, right? Maybe your tool is something else, and that's fine, because ultimately we're all working towards the same goal, again, which is social impact. And just on the very, very last note, I'm glad that this question came up, because we were talking all about grant money and funding, but one thing that I have really strived to include in my work as much as I possibly can, and it's not possible with every project, but especially with my long-term work that I shared with you all today, I've really tried to incorporate, social impact elements. So for example, Light Inside was actually published as a photo book in 2018. And I partnered with Leila Huerta, who is a trans activist in Peru. And we partnered with Amnesty International and universities in Lima, and we distributed the book free of charge to healthcare centers and universities and gave presentations. So we really, tried to use that photography in ways and partner with people who are not photographers to sort of work together and work collectively to educate and to create social impact. And then the Women on the Move project, we partnered with the Pulitzer Center on Crisis Reporting to create educational curriculum with the stories. So actually, if you go to their website, I think it's there on their website. It's pretty easy to find. You can see the educational curriculum, and the photographers on our team have given dozens of presentations virtual across classrooms, in the United States to teachers and students. And so, that was a way that we tried to increase impact beyond publication of the work. And then in full transparency, what I'm really, really, really working towards, where I really want to finish Abre Camino, thanks, Rebecca. Why I really want to finish Abre Camino is because with my work from Central America to the United States, if I can get funding to do the United States chapter, is I want to partner with organizations, lawyers, activists throughout the region to create a guidebook, like a small booklet, pamphlet information that is photo driven and information driven about the various, what is migration? Because what I've experienced is that a lot of women are fleeing their countries because they've been, threatened, or, they're facing extortion. And a lot of people leave without even knowing what they might face on the journey or where the next city is, so a lot of people are learning on the go. And of course that puts people at another, level of vulnerability. So if we could distribute these pamphlets in communities throughout Central America where migration is so prevalent, especially among communities of trans women, it's something small that they, that people can take with them, resource to organizations in different cities along the journeys. So really that's why I'm trying to finish Abre Camino, because I want to create, this guidebook. Just one, little anecdote. I mean, I was following one woman all the way to the US border. And one of the questions I asked her was what's the first thing you're going to do when you get to the border? And, what's your next step kind of in terms of migration? And she was like, I don't know. And she found out about the metering process, remember the number, because she happened to pass another woman who is trans from El Salvador on the street who told her about the metering process, so there's information is so important and can be so empowering. So yeah, long-winded answer of saying if you feel like the photography isn't enough and you want to do more, think of ways that you can use that photography beyond just the insular publication, which is important and very valid for sure. But thinking of other organizations you can partner with, other people who are working on that issue, but in a different capacity with different tools. How can you partner with them to come together to create something really collective and really powerful that, might create social impact? So that is all I have to say.
That was amazing. It was super informative. And yeah, we could seriously talk about this for 18 more hours. So we should absolutely tuck this away into season 2 of the Essentials.
Yeah, this is not Clubhouse. We're not going to be here for 20 hours from now.
Literally would love to talk to you for 20 hours about all of the things that we have discussed today, but we should wrap it up. So thank you so much for being here, Danielle. Thank you to everyone who joined and everyone who stuck around. This was such an amazing class. I know personally I learned a ton. Remember to register for our final course, which is next week with Yagazi. It's on Wednesday. Peter dropped the link in the chat a little bit ago, but It's just our website, everydayprojects.org/webinars. Register for Yagazi, and if you missed any of the previous classes, they're all up there. Thank you, Polly. Thank you, Black women photographers. Remember to donate to them if you can. And we can't wait to see you next week. So thank you, everyone. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rebecca. And sorry, I probably have brownie in my mouth because that was,
That sounds perfect.
But no, I think this was super helpful. I do want to say that you guys also remember just to be, thinking outside of the box, think of other places that are non-traditional that you can find funding for. We mentioned in the, the class description, like, print sales and whatever, just whatever you have to do, like there are other ways, even just getting creative for where you look. One thing that I mentioned in Clubhouse, I think, but long time ago, but also in one of our chats about grants, is Google Alerts. Set a Google Alert with your, your location, whatever keyword. You'll get a bunch of emails, but you'll get those like in your inbox of like, if I do a keyword of grants, open, photojournalism, I will get any like Google related thing relating to grants that are open relating to photojournalism. And that's how I, stay aware of like things that are open, but also just like other random places and other like local cities in the US, local whatever, like wherever your country of origin, wherever you're at, like your state or country or local, whatever, also has funding for you. I think that was also mentioned, but just be creative of where you look and be aggressive with it. But this was super informative. As Rebecca said, we could do this forever, but we can't. So that's a wrap. Thank you, Danielle, for such a great class and being, generous with your time by going over. And thank you, everyone, for the very smart questions.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Polly. Thank you, Rebecca.